So I want to thank our reader, Gloria Nye, for the great reading she always does, and Gary Lynn Floyd and our music team for the wonderful music of today that always supports the message. This month of March, we're talking about relationships, and our message today is choose your battles. You're invited to embark on a journey that reminds us that we live in a world filled with conflict and with many opportunities to pick our battles, whether in our relationships, in our workplaces, or even with ourselves. Not every battle is worth fighting. So, learning to discern which conflicts bring us closer to love and connection and which take us further away is an important skill. So, stay with us today and learn how to choose your battle in all types of relationships. And before I continue, let me give you your question for the week. What is the one choice you can make today to remember the power of choice, to shift from conflict to love and connection, and to choose the grace of letting go? One more time. What is the one choice you might make today to remember the power of choice, to shift from conflict to connection, and to choose the grace of letting go? So there was a husband and wife, and they were having a disagreement. And the wife said, "You always argue with me." And the husband replied, "That's not true." And she looked at him and said, "See, you're doing it again right now." Now, that might sound funny, and it's so true. How often do we fight or pick a battle for the sake of being right rather than choosing love? You know, A Course in Miracles teaches us, would you rather be right or happy? That's a profound question. And actually, it has helped me through the years realize that my attachment to being right often stands in the way of my own happiness and peace. And, of course, in the way of true connection. When any of us feel the urge to engage in an argument or prove our point, it's a great time for us to take a pause and ask this question: is this leading to more love, or is it reinforcing separation? Is this leading to more love, or is it reinforcing separation? Now, yes, there are some battles that are worth taking on. And for me, once I learned to ask if I'd rather be right or happy, or if my response was leading to more love, it certainly shifted how often I learned to forgive and just let go rather than going into battle on some issue that maybe in the big scheme of things really didn't make any difference. Don't get me wrong, I love to be right. And I began to see how often that being right led to me being unhappy. Last week, when we talked about setting boundaries, I quoted Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind, who reminded us life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. Now, while I use this quote to show examples of setting boundaries, it applies to conflict as well. If we're constantly looking for battles, guess what? We're going to find them. And if instead we are constantly looking for love and connection, we find that love and connection. So which would you rather have? Conflict or love and connection? And how do we apply the question to our lives? Well, here are 3 questions that help me make a decision if a battle is truly worth fighting. Number 1, does it serve love and connection? Number 2, Will this matter in 5 days, 5 months, or 5 years? And number 3, is there a way to address this difference with grace rather than force? Learning to ask those 3 questions is just one way to shift from conflict to connection. You might even want to put them on a sticky note somewhere where you see them regularly so that you can remind yourself how to choose your battles. And if you see them often enough, when conflict arises, chances are you're going to remember to ask yourself that series of questions before you go into battle. JoyBell C wrote this: choose your battles wisely. After all, life isn't measured by how many times you stood up to fight. It's not winning battles that makes you happy, but it's how many times you turned away and chose to look into a better direction. Life is too short to spend it warring. Fight only the most important ones. Let the rest go. Now that is great advice. And it's important to remember to choose your battles for a number of reasons. Not every conflict is worth addressing. If you can answer those 3 questions, you know which battles are worth addressing. And remember that every battle has a cost. Ever notice how draining conflict can be, both time-wise and emotionally? Those resources are limited. So even if you win, it takes energy that might be better spent elsewhere. Isn't it better to be protective of your time and your energy? And the third thing is, our time here on earth is limited. When you look back on your life, what do you want to remember? The battles you won, or that you had a meaningful life where you spent your energy only on the things that really mattered? I know my answers to those questions. And I think sometimes we choose battles to protect who we think we are, or because we put too much value on someone else's opinion of who we are. Virginia Satir, a pioneer in family therapy, said, "We must not allow other people's limited perceptions to define us." She reminds us that we don't have to react to every slight or to every disagreement. We can rise above and choose peace. I remember the first time I saw Terry Cole Whitaker's book that was entitled, "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." It actually was a wake-up call for me because I always thought it was very important what other people thought of me. And yet, what I found out is that Virginia Satir is right. We don't have to allow other people's limited perceptions of us to define us. There are a number of ways to learn to let go of others' opinions and choose peace rather than going into battle. It might take some time because perhaps your habits, like mine for many years, was to be right. And that often kicks in really early when someone says something that I know isn't right. Thomas Trowler, who was a great metaphysical thinker, wrote, "Principle is not bound by precedent." What Trowler is saying there is just because we've reacted in anger in the past doesn't mean we have to do so in the future. We don't need to repeat the past. We can break the cycle and choose differently. And it is a choice. Sometimes walking away is a sign of strength and wisdom. Avoid the pettiness and place your attention on what is important for you in your life. And if you do think that the battle is worth fighting, it's helpful to remember a few tips to bring about connection. First of all, seek to understand. One of the most powerful ways to de-escalate conflict is to listen deeply. Everybody has different views. And instead of preparing a rebuttal while the other person is speaking, practice true listening. Reflect back what you hear and acknowledge their feelings. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but you can affirm who they are as a person. Remember, love is the foundation of life, and deeply listening is one way to cultivate more love and less conflict. Another thing you can do is share your own feelings. You can often bridge a divide by sharing how you're feeling. It helps to be specific, such as, my stomach is hurting right now from this conflict, or I'm feeling disconnected and would like to change that. The more specific you can be about how you are being impacted, the better chance you have of the other person understanding your view and where you're coming from. Another thing is being supportive of the other person's needs. Now, that might seem difficult when you're in conflict, but again, everybody is different, and it's helpful to try to see the situation from their viewpoint. I remember a time I was telling a coworker about a conflict that I had early that morning, and she agreed with my partner. And I was quite surprised that she wasn't supporting me. And when I talked with her more, I realized that his view was valid, and I could see it because she was explaining it more clearly from her point of view and why she agreed with him. I had a bit of repair to do that night, and it helped me realize how often I could get tunnel vision in my own view. Another thing we can do is brainstorm a win-win solution. The best solutions are the ones in which both people feel heard and acknowledged, and the outcome feels like a win-win. The enemy is the conflict, not the person. If you care enough about the other person to change the situation, your goal is not really to bring the other person down. Rather, it's to work together to find a solution that meets both of your needs. That is absolutely the best solution. Rene Descartes said, "Whenever anyone has offended me, I try to raise my soul so high that the offense cannot reach it." I want to repeat that. Whenever anyone has offended me, I try to raise my soul so high that the offense cannot reach it. Now, that is grounding yourself in high consciousness and learning not to take things personally, and the way to choose peace rather than being right. Truly, choosing peace is not becoming a wimp or rolling over and playing the doormat. There's actually a grace in letting go and choosing love and peace over conflict. I want to remind you of an acronym I've used before that I borrowed from Mark Anthony Lord for grace. Grace is God revealing absolute compassion everywhere. God revealing absolute compassion everywhere. Imagine if before we chose to enter into any conflict, we imagined ourselves in a calm and peaceful place where we felt safe and that no one could hurt us. And then coming from that place, entering the conflict and knowing that we could have a civil conversation about the conflict and achieve a win-win solution. If I feel myself losing my composure, Rene Descartes' advice is certainly helpful to remember. Reverend Catherine Economou says, when you surrender to what is, you open yourself to what could be. Letting go of unnecessary battles allows space for understanding and for growth. I remember a time in my life when I was so angry with my sister. We usually had a great relationship, and I had gotten hurt about something. When I finally got the courage to talk with her about it, she didn't even remember the incident, and she had no idea that I had gotten hurt. All my angst and anger were only hurting me. All too often, holding on to resentment only poisons our own hearts. We think we're hurting the other person, but what we're actually doing is cutting ourselves off from love. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, for every minute you are angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. Isn't life too short to waste on unnecessary conflict? Instead of engaging in battles that deplete our energy, we can channel that energy into creating harmony and connection. Let me tell you a little story. There was a young lady named Maria, and she'd always been close to her youngest sister, Elena. But ever since their mother passed away, tension had built between them. There was the stress of dividing their mother's belongings, and that led to arguments. And sooner or later, what happened is they stopped talking altogether. Well, one day, Maria found a letter from her mother inside a book that she had received. In it, her mother had written, "My greatest hope is that you two will always choose love over pride. Nothing matters more than your bond." Maria's heart ached, and she realized how much energy she had spent being angry with her sister instead of trying to heal it. So that evening, she took a deep breath and she called Elena. And instead of rehashing their arguments, she started the conversation with, "I miss you and I don't want to fight anymore." There was silence on the phone, and then Elena whispered, "I miss you too." Rather than proving who was right, Maria chose connection. The sisters met the next day. They apologized to each other and they cried together. And their love was deepened because Maria chose peace over conflict. In the end, the battle for love was the only thing worth fighting for. Wouldn't you rather feel connected than have tension in your life? I know I would. There are a lot of practical applications for choosing your battles. Each week, I've been suggesting some spiritual practices that help our weekly lesson. So this week, I want to provide some ways to cultivate discernment by choosing your battles wisely and fostering peace and love over conflict. One of the spiritual practices is the pause practice, which I've mentioned earlier. Before reacting to any situation, just pause and take 3 deep breaths. And during your pause, it's a good time to ask that question. Is this leading to more love, or is it reinforcing separation? The simple pause creates space between a trigger and a response, allowing you to choose love instead of reacting in anger. And I already talked about the 3 questions you can reflect upon. Does this serve love and connection? Will this matter in 5 days, 5 months, or 5 years? And is there a way to address this with grace rather than force? If the answer to any of these leans towards disharmony, consider letting it go and approaching it differently. And then there's mindful listening. I talked about how conflict arises when we're more focused on defending our point of view rather than understanding the other person. So when we practice mindful listening, we fully hear what the other person is saying before we form a response. And we learn to repeat back to them what we heard so that we can clarify and de-escalate the situation. Another practice is the metta or the loving kindness meditation. We've talked about this Buddhist practice before as well. You can recall that it involves sending love and goodwill to yourself and to your loved ones, to difficult people, and to the world. The practice is designed to shift energy from hostility to compassion, and it makes it easier to choose peace rather than conflict. And then there's the "Would I rather be right or happy" mantra. That's from A Course in Miracles, as I said earlier. And the ego thrives on being right, but the soul seeks peace. So when you're faced with a potential argument, just silently ask yourself, would I rather be right or happy? And then refocus on what truly matters. Sometimes in order to be happy, we do have to choose to fight that battle. Another thing you can do is you can journal for discernment and future peace. At the end of the day, just reflect in a journal using questions like, what situations triggered a reaction in me today? Or, was my response to certain situations rooted in love or in ego? Or, what would I do differently next time? This journaling practice increases self-awareness and helps you to make more conscious choices as you move forward. And then there's the sacred delay method. If you're unsure whether to engage in a disagreement, delay responding for at least an hour or even a day. Time often allows our emotions to settle, and we find out that what seemed urgent yesterday or a couple hours ago no longer feels worth the battle. And if you must respond in the moment, maybe say something like, I'd like to think about that and get back to you. It at least lets the person know that you're not necessarily agreeing with them, but you want to think about it. Another practice is the power of blessing others. If someone angers or offends you, try silently blessing them instead of reacting negatively. Just say to yourself, I send you love, and I release this. I send you love, and I release this. This little phrase can transform your energy and also diffuse the tension. Nature walks for perspective are a great way to shift things because spending time in nature very often resets our perspective. When we're overwhelmed by conflict, taking a walk outside or breathing deeply and remembering the vastness of life can truly settle us down. And many battles lose their significance when we see them from a higher perspective. And last but not least, surrender through prayer or an affirmation. When struggling with whether to engage in conflict, offer it up to prayer. You might ask your guide or spirit to help you. Spirit, help me see through the lens of love, or guide me to the highest and most peaceful response. And you know I love affirmations, so you might use something like, how is it I so effortlessly choose peace over conflict and release the need to control and embrace love instead? By incorporating these practices, you train your mind and heart to prioritize love and to prioritize connection and inner peace over unnecessary conflict. Before I end, I want to say one more thing that I feel is significant to this conversation. If you decide to choose a battle and things don't go as you'd hoped or planned, acknowledge your feelings and then let go of the conflict. There is a grace in letting go, even if the issue seems unresolved. Hanging on can only have a long-term negative impact on you. So find a way to move forward. Have an exit plan that allows you to let go and let God. And I want to reiterate that every day we have the choice to be warriors of love rather than soldiers of conflict. When we pick our battles wisely, we make space for joy and peace and deep, meaningful relationships. So the next time you find yourself on the verge of an argument, take a breath. Incorporate one of the many spiritual practices that I provided with you today, such as asking those 3 questions. And remember this: choosing peace doesn't mean you lose. It means you win something far greater: love and connection. So in summary, how might you learn to choose your battles wisely? Well, remember the power of choice. Would you rather be right or happy? Does the choice lead to love or separation? And then shift from conflict to love and connection. Principle is not bound by precedent. Find a win-win solution. Listen deeply and acknowledge the other person's feelings. Choose the grace of letting go. Surrender to what is and choose peace. Know that anger steals your happiness, and channel your energy into harmony and connection. So here's your affirmation for the week. How is it I so willingly, energetically, and effortlessly remember the power of choice, shift from conflict to connection, and choose the grace of letting go? And your challenge for this week is to make a conscious choice to choose your battles carefully. Learn to let go of conflict and choose love and connection. And adopt at least 2 of the practices to strengthen your ability to choose your battles wisely. Use some of the ones I gave you or make up your own. Let's pray. We take a deep, nourishing breath and we move into that place within us where we know the essence of God is love and joy and peace and ease, and all that God is lives right within us as individual expressions of God. So what I know to be the truth is that each of you is taking into account those 3 questions and also a lot of the other practices to learn to choose your battles wisely so that you can be happy and feel that connection in life with others. And as we feel that connection, what I know is we learn to listen carefully to what other people's needs happen to be at any particular moment. And we brainstorm to have win-win solutions. So I am so grateful that you spent some time with us today. And I just released this into that divine yes, knowing it's already done. So I can say amen and we can affirm it together. And so it is. And I want to thank everybody for donating and sending money into our CSL Southeast Louisiana area. And I'm grateful that we can continue to show up for you on a weekly basis. So thanks again and enjoy our offertory song.